Hello, Eagles Nation. Vincent Foast here, and welcome to a Week 3 Eagles chat. Where right here is how the whole entire Delaware Valley feels after that beautiful Eagles victory. Is now we can all officially relax after taking our heart and blood pressure medication. As I'm kind of surprised a blood pressure medication company doesn't sponsor the Eagles, especially after games like this. They can make one heck of a lot of money. But hey, the main thing is the Eagles came away with the victory. And I guess the other main thing is that the Eagles learned how to play football in the second half. And I think it all boils down to one specific main thing. The Eagles are 3-0. That's a lot of main things there, but let's keep the 3-0 main thing, shall we? I think that's a good idea. But before we get into it, make sure you like and subscribe to the Eagles Chat YouTube channel, as well as following us on Instagram at Chat Eagles, where you can find daily updates on your birds. You can always find our Instagram in the description of this Eagles Chat video. But now, let's get right into it. We're going to first start off with the injury update. Now, with this injury update, we have two big-time players on this update, and we're just going to get right into it. And the first one we have up here is the Pro Bowler right tackle for the Eagles, Lane Johnson. Now, the news with him is he is said to suffer a neck injury. He is said to have suffered, a neck injury. Now, this injury happened at the 8:07 mark of the first quarter, and it was said to have happened after that tush-push touchdown for the Eagles, which was the first TD of the game. Now, he was listed as questionable for the remainder of the game, and as the second half approached, people were looking for him to possibly come back out. Well, he didn't. So that's something we're going to continue to monitor as the rest of the week goes on very, very closely, as Lane Johnson was definitely a big loss, and it showed during this game. So we're going to continue to monitor that very, very closely, of course, as the rest of the week continues. And the next guy we have up here for the injury update is the cornerback, Adoree Jackson. Now, the news with Adoree Jackson is he is said to have a groin injury. Now, we'll continue to monitor that as well as the rest of the week continues. As make sure to follow us on our Eagles Chat Instagram. We'll have the Eagles injury report as the rest of the week continues as well, posted on our Instagram story. So make sure to stay updated with your birds right there as well, as these were two losses that did show, especially Lane Johnson and the guys that came in to replace Lane Johnson. It was definitely noticeable. We're going to talk about those two in a little bit, as Matt Pryor was a little concerning. And then there was another guy who also shared the last name of Johnson, who definitely stepped up in a big way, Fred Johnson. We're going to talk about them in a little bit. You're just going to have to stay tuned for this Eagles chat when we get to those guys. But let's now first move into the defense. Now, the news with the defense was definitely interesting. I have to say that at most. Now, we're going to start off with our defensive player of the game. But for this game, it's not player of the game. It's players of the game. I had to pick more than one because the way that I saw this defense play and the way that they stepped up in key situations, it wasn't just one player of the game that I had to highlight. And obviously, most of you know who one of the players is going to be. But we're going to first start off with the other one, and that is Zack Baun. Now, the reason I have Zack Baun up here, of course, he got the interception at the beginning of the game, but he also had 7 tackles. Not only was it the 7 tackles that got him up here on the board, but it was also the pass breakups that he had and the pressure he was able to help get on Matthew Stafford. This defense showed up when necessary. And of course they did. I understand the amount of points that they let up. I get that. Trust me. But they were able to step up in key situations. And Zack Baun, the Pro Bowler linebacker for the Eagles, has really shown up in key situations. It wasn't a huge game for him last week, but this game right here was definitely something that I definitely have to talk about him for 100%. Was something definitely incredible to witness and watch. So Zack Baun definitely has to be up here. One heck of a game. Was all over the place with either pass breakups, tackles, getting pressure on Stafford, and of course the interception as well. So Zack Baun definitely has to be up here. But the next guy, you already know, it shouldn't be any surprise, and that is Jordan Davis. Now, of course, Jordan Davis had that 61-yard return at the end of the game on that blocked field goal. Definitely, I know everyone's talking about that, but not just there, but the amount of pressure Jordan Davis and this defense was starting to get on Matthew Stafford, and the fact that they were able to start to get Stafford to collapse, where the Rams offense was going gangbusters, obviously, in the first half. Well, came the second half, things started to slow down. And when I mean slow down, yeah, they only scored a touchdown. So this is something where the Eagles' defensive line were able to really start to get rocking and rolling. They were really starting to get into a groove. And, of course, guys like Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis really doing well. And, of course, the first blocked field goal, remember, the Eagles didn't just have one blocked field goal. They had 2. Earlier in the game, they had another one, and that was a combination of Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter. Now, of course, on the blocked field goal, the one that mattered most, of course, at the end of the game, which was the game-saving play. Of course, Jordan Davis, he ran it back. And of course, another little bit of an interesting stat, Jordan Davis hit 18.59 miles per hour on that return to the end zone. And that is the fastest for a player over 330 pounds since the year 2017. So Jordan Davis, definitely interesting. And a little funny interview quote that Jordan Davis said was, last year, I don't know if I would have been able to do that. But yes, those of you know Jordan Davis lost some weight this past offseason, and it definitely showed. He was able to move down the field at a good rate, so great for the big guy to have a play like that. But also said in that Jordan Davis interview post-game, he said on the sideline, we were really making sure to time up his kicks. We were starting to understand, especially when it was inside the 30-yard line or so, the leverage he was getting on his kicks. And we were starting to really understand, okay, when to put our hands up and know the exact moment to get in there. And he said he saw the gap and he went for it, and his hand went up there at the perfect time. And not only did it just get it down, he had his full hand, and I think that part of his wrist and forearm got there as well. So the Eagles, let's just say, they had it timed up perfectly, and they knew exactly what to expect. So definitely, out of Jordan Davis, one heck of a game, and so great to see him get a touchdown and return it for 61 yards. And yes, 18.59 miles per hour is what Jordan Davis got up to. That's something that says its own story right there. I don't need to say anything else on that, but definitely great to see out of these two guys. These are our Eagles Chat players of the game for defense. But now moving on to the rest of the defense, and something that I definitely have to talk about here for the rest of the defense is right here, key plays. Now, with the Eagles defense, of course, at the beginning of the game, well, nothing was going right, offense or defense. And of course, points were being given up like crazy. But then there came a time where they were able to stop the Rams twice in the red zone and only hold them to 3 field goals in a row. So this was something where it was definitely key. And I understand on one of those stops that the Eagles got in the red zone, specifically the one that was inside the 5, was the holding penalty that helped them on Jihad Campbell, where it was a clear holding penalty. And next thing you know, the Rams were forced to pretty much kick it through as it backed them up a pretty good amount. So that was something where, some people were saying, well, the holding penalty helped you out there. Okay, I'll give you that. But this was something where the Eagles defense was able to capitalize. And this is something that Vic Fangio has been talking about before, that bend but don't break type of defense. And that's exactly what we saw today, was a defense that will bend but it won't break. And it was able to hold the Eagles in the game just enough that they were able to put a comeback together. And of course, if those weren't field goals and the Rams just completely rolled down, remember, the offense wasn't doing much of anything. So there was little to no momentum on the other side of the ball for the Eagles. So being a defenseman, that's extremely hard to keep as a good morale going out in the field every time, especially since the offense would come on. It was mostly like a 3 and out. Next thing you know, the defense, right when they got off, they were preparing to go right back on again. So keeping that stamina was key. And the fact that the defense was able to hold as well as they did, of course, yes, they still allowed points, but they were field goals. And again, if those were touchdowns, who knows how the end of the game would be. It probably wouldn't be the Eagles on top. Something tells me it would be a team that's the color yellow and blue. But this is something where, again, the defense came up in key situations and they were able to perform in key situations. Of course, with whether it was key pass breakups, good pressure. Of course, some people were saying, again, you got lucky. Matthew Stafford overthrew his receivers at times. Well, yes, he did. But if you look at those situations, the pressure was starting to build again. So these are all little tiny key things that will go in a good direction for the Eagles defense. Now, of course, there were questionable times where, like, for example, sometimes they had a linebacker on guys like Puka Nacua for some reason, one of their best receivers for the Rams. That had me a little confused. I saw Jihad Campbell on Nacua sometimes, and another time I saw Bond on him. Didn't necessarily understand why they had a linebacker on Nacua at times. Didn't get that, but again, they were still able to get the job done. So there were some times that I was a little, let's just say, I had a question mark over my head, or the light bulb, in other words, you could say the light bulb wasn't on, because I had no idea what this defense was trying to do at certain times. But they were able to get rocking and rolling, and they shaped up when necessary, and again, got back-to-back good stops when necessary. And of course, in the second half, they were really able to get good stops when necessary as well. So the defense really came together well and was something that I was really, really impressed about, and something that I could really get behind. I know the fans at the Link got behind in a big way. But now, moving on to Jalen Hurts' play. Now, of course, right here, this was kind of all over the place. If we just did an Eagles chat off of the first half, I would have told you that it was the worst thing I've ever seen in my life, and that Jalen Hurts was definitely nowhere near even a top 10 QB, let alone maybe a top 20 QB, because the way things were going were not great. And of course, I understand the offensive line didn't help. I get there were a lot of things contributing, but at the beginning of the game, the short, quick passes, there were times Hurts needed to get the ball out of the pocket a lot quicker. And there were also times he had guys open and he just didn't. By the time the ball got there, the gap was already closed up. There were many times where A.J. Brown, I saw, was open. By the time he got the ball out to him, the gap was closed up. It was batted away pretty much. So that was basically how the first half went for the Eagles. Every time they tried to use the pass game, it would just completely collapse. And every time they tried to use the run game, it was snuffed out by the LA Rams, which is not a surprise knowing that defensive line that the Rams have. But here was the total yards that the Eagles had, period, including everything in the first half. 33. That was the total yards the Eagles had. But, of course, you take that to the next half. Jalen Hurts in the second half alone, well, just trailing the Rams, had 18 out of 29 first passing for 212 passing yards and 3 passing touchdowns. And, of course, yes, folks, they were the first passing touchdowns of the season. These previous 2 weeks, the Eagles didn't score a single passing touchdown. They were all on the ground running. So with Jalen Hurts, his overall stats, 21 out of 32 for 226 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, and of course a QB rating of 124.22. So that's where we stand currently at this time. And of course, yes, those passing yards aren't that much different from when the first half happened to the second half. Of course, when in the second half, 212 passing yards, and overall 226 passing yards. So you can tell those numbers are not that different at all, where pretty much everything was done in the second half. The Eagles only played half a game, specifically with the offense. It was only a half a game played, but they still managed to come on top. And Jalen Hurts in that second half finally was able to come alive. And again, knowing what the LA Rams were doing, they were keying in on the run game. And you saw those linebackers move up. And of course, the LA Rams, with one of their linebackers, specifically Byron Young, who had 3 sacks, coming into the game. He also had a sack today, so now he has 4 sacks on the season. But Byron Young, a guy that they had to watch, they were moving those linebackers up. The Rams were stacking up the box, and they did that, of course, because they knew the Eagles' run game, they were going to try to use it. Well, the run game got shut down completely. And since the Rams were stacking the box, yes, there were passes that were open over the middle. And finally, in the second half, the Eagles picked it up. And next thing you know, how was the first touchdown scored? Well, it was a pass over the middle to Dallas Goedert, who ran in for the touchdown. So that's exactly what I was talking about. You knew the Rams were going to key in on the run game, and they absolutely did. They shut down Barkley completely. And this was something where, again, they were bringing their linebackers up, and they were stacking the box. They were filling the gaps. The options for the run game was very slim, and of course, the way that the Eagles were trying to run it were obviously having Barkley run to the right of Hurts most of the time, and of course, it was clogged up completely. The Rams knew exactly what was coming, so the pass game pretty much had no choice but to come alive, and that's exactly what happened. This is something where, again, the Eagles were able to adapt, where, okay, they're kind of getting back to the way they were last season. Okay, you're not going to let us do the run. We're not going to be able to use the run. Well, let's use our other weapon, and the Eagles finally, for the first time this year, had a good passing game where Hurts also had a substantial amount of passing yards as well. But now moving on past that, of course, we'll get into the receivers in a little bit, but something also that kind of drove me absolutely crazy in the offensive area was special teams. And that was, of course, the kick returns. So the kick returns were kind of getting on my nerves in a big way. I don't know if you guys noticed, but this was something where it was kind of driving me up a wall, where I don't know how many times that the kick returns were completely dropped. And this was something that was happening time and time again, and we're setting up the Eagles in pretty much awful field position. And this was something that kept on happening, and I was pretty much going to jump out of the seat at this one. Of course, Tank Bigsby and John Mechie were the 2 guys back there receiving these kick returns. And I tell you what, it felt like every single time that a kick return happened, one of these guys dropped it. And next thing you know, they had to run back, get the ball. And then by the time they turned around, everyone was upfield, and they were, I don't know how many times the Eagles were stopped within the 20-yard line. So they had bad field position pretty much almost every time they had a kick return, because one of these guys in the back pretty much would just flub it every single time. So that was something that got on my nerves, let's just say, quite a lot yesterday. But yeah, let's just leave it at that. The Eagles were able to get the win, but that's something I definitely had to bring up as it was kind of driving me up a wall. But now to move into the rest of the offense, and of course getting into some more of the nitty gritty with the wide receivers, and of course, yes, finally they were able to have a big game. Of course, you had Dallas Goedert, who got the first touchdown, who had a reception for 33 yards, as well with Devontae Smith, 8 receptions for 60 yards. He had a touchdown, and A.J. Brown for the first time getting over 100 yards, as he also got his 50th receiving touchdown, which is a pretty good milestone for A.J. Brown. But 6 receptions for 109 yards. Of course, like I said, he got a touchdown as well today. So definitely interesting to see. Great to see the receiving core getting targeted once again. Jahad Donson only got 1 target for 7 yards, but still, it was great to see the Eagles in general start to get targets once again and have your wide receiver 1 and 2 really show up in this game and get used. That's a great thing to see, especially. So definitely have to mention that. And another guy that I really have to bring up is a offensive lineman. Now, of course, with the whole Lane Johnson situation, it was getting kind of scary. And of course, having guys like Matt Pryor in there, well, it didn't do well at all because that whole right side of the offensive line was constantly collapsing and was something where, yeah, that's why the Rams got 4 sacks in the Eagles today. Was I don't know how many times they went through that Pryor area where it was just a completely blown block. And this was something where Pryor was taken out after the series where Hurts got completely nailed and driven into the ground. And after that final series where, I mean, it was a bad sack on Hurts, they brought in Fred Johnson. Now, he said coming up to this, he didn't play a single rep at right tackle all week in practice. So he was coming into this absolutely cold. And man, he didn't disappoint whatsoever. He was thrown in there on Sunday and, well, with a greatly paid off maneuver by the Eagles as he showed up in a big way. And of course, Jalen Hurts had to quote him on this because he helped Hurts out in the big way, of course. As Hurts said, quote, he showed up and showed out when his number was called on. It's a beautiful game. That's exactly what Hurts said. And hey, I mean, it was happy for him to get help down there, to get the ball down the field and not actually get time in the pocket, as well as when Hurts made these passes, he was able to get time. And a couple times on these design QB runs, again, it was great blocking out in front by Fred Johnson. As he was out in front, Hurts was following him. So this was something where on those design QB runs, the design QB runs were more successful than when they gave it to Barkley. And that was, again, they were just good setups. And a couple of times, Fred Johnson was the guy in front to help defend Hurts right there and get the blocking out in front of Hurts. So definitely a great game by Fred Johnson. Great to see, and hopefully we'll see more about him in the future. I mean, Lane Johnson, he's getting older. Could Fred Johnson possibly be a new star in that department for the Eagles at right tackle? We don't know. It could possibly be something. He didn't play right tackle all week, but yet played that well as he was just thrown into that position. That's definitely a great thing to see out of a player. I don't know. That's just me, or maybe not. I don't know. But now, let's get into our final slide, of course, for the offense. And, of course, yes, you already know I have to talk about it with the play calls. And Kevin Patullo, at first, it didn't look that great. And, of course, there was Jalen Hurts on the sideline, seen getting a little vocal with Kevin Patullo as well. So, definitely something that was a little concerning at first. And the play calls, again, on 3rd and long, those run plays that were called, didn't necessarily like them at all. And again, the first half, everything was off for the Eagles, of course. When I said the kick returns, the defense, the offense, it seemed like it was just an absolute team commitment on being off in the first half. But hey, the Eagles were able to turn it around, and that is the absolute main thing, 100%. And then something else I definitely have to bring up right here is I don't want to hear, period, Jalen Hurts is the one that won the Eagles this game. I don't want to hear Jordan Davis is the one that won the Eagles this game. The thing is, this is probably the most I've seen out of the Eagles in an absolute team win from last year. This is something where, of course, since last year, I have not seen the Eagles have a team win like this, where the defense stepped up when they needed to, the offense stepped up when they needed to, and they all came together in that second half. So again, I don't want to hear someone saying Jalen Hurts was the reason they won this game. I don't want to hear someone saying Jordan Davis was the reason that they won this game. The fact is that the defense showed up when they needed to, and the offense showed up when they needed to. Would I rather the offense get that 2-point conversion at the end of the game to kind of lessen the pressure in that situation? Yes, but hey, the main thing is the defense had the offense back when it mattered most. And I mean, you just look at that second half. The defense was able to get the stops. The offense was able to come on the field and get the points. It was a team, absolute team sport in that second half. I don't want to hear anyone saying one specific player was the one that won on that game. No, it was a team win and absolutely beautiful to see. Probably the most complete team win out of the 3 games the Eagles have played so far this season. So that is definitely something that needs to be marked down 100%. But now moving into coming up next week, week 4, the Eagles will be heading down to Tampa Bay against the Buccaneers Sunday, September 28th at 1 o'clock p.m. We'll see what the Eagles will be able to do. For some reason, the Buccaneers always had the Eagles number, but we'll just have to wait and see. And again, like I said at the beginning of this Eagles chat, with heart and blood pressure medication, well, if you think our fan base needs it, you should take a look at what the Buccaneers have been doing as of recent. All 3 of their wins, yes, they're 3-0, but you look at all 3 of the wins that they have gotten, and let's just say they weren't smooth, and their fans, let's just say, probably were threatening to jump off a lot of ledges. So that was something where, I mean, the Buccaneers, all 3 of these games that they played were by the hair on their chinny chin chin. They just slipped by. So we'll see what the Eagles are able to do next week in Tampa. Hopefully they'll be able to get the W, and we'll see what happens. Hopefully the Eagles can make it 4-0. But hey, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's enjoy this win. The Eagles are still undefeated, and that's the way we like it here in the Delaware Valley. But that's all for me. Let's enjoy this Eagles win. And as always, go Birds! Have a good week, everyone. Enjoy Victory Monday coming up tomorrow. Just have a good week, everybody. Enjoy the Eagles win. Have a good one.